Nope. It just goes
Nope.
yellow.
We are now live. The first word in this show is going to be Matt going, nope. uh, right, as always, we'll start. Actually, we'll start with Maddie. Your earliest memories of video games.
Easy. Largely due to that I wasn't such a big video game player as a kid. So for me, it was a second-hand Sega Master System, and therefore the first game I ever would have played would have been Alex Kidd in Miracle World.
Yep, that's
Yeah,
the
the
one.
built-in game, and it
Yeah.
came with Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, and that was about the extent of my childhood video games. So
Right.
Sega Master System. I never
Mhm.
made it past level 3 of Alex Kidd.
If
That was
that
terrible.
if that was the one with Alex Kidd in Miracle World built in, that was the Sega Master System 2, I think,
Ooh, there you go.
which was just smaller and more refined, more portable.
I did have some experience with an Atari game system,
Mhm.
but as a lot of people close to me will realise that if there's ever a new piece of technology purchased and there isn't the risk of voiding a warranty, I will normally dismantle it upon a few hours of owning it to find out how it works.
Uh,
So the Atari
Fair enough.
system, yeah, I think it only lasted a day, and I don't remember what
Was
what was played before it was dismantled and investigated. And
my
so
toy robot from last week that I got for Christmas was eventually dismantled by me. Okay, I'm actually going to go next because I'm curious to
Alright.
hear your story, Zach. So
Alright.
mine was in a little fish and chip shop. If you look just there, and I've enabled it so the audience can see the links as well.
fantastic.
The audience will now see our chat, so just be aware of that. See that little green store with the car in front of it?
Yes.
Once upon a time, that was a fish and chip store. And this was back in the early 80s, in the days when it was okay to have pinball machines and tabletop arcade machines inside your fish and chip shop or your pizzeria or your whatever. This particular one had a pinball machine. Assuming that, because I personally think pinball is pinball and video games are video games, but I still think of pinball as video games. And it was the Superman pinball machine, which I have since, not recently, but since found a virtual version of. So I've been able to relive my childhood. And when I found it, it's like, this is crap. Wasn't, because pinball machines have come a long way. It was a very basic pinball machine. But apparently I was quite good because I have this one specific memory. I was standing on the box that I had to stand on because I was three years old at this point in my life. So 77, 78, 79. It would have been 1980. And I was going away at this pinball. I thought I was doing quite well, but I remember there being adults, but thinking back, they were probably just teenagers. Saying, look at this kid go, man, he's really good, or something along those lines. But later into the fish and chip shop's life, they had a space video game, which I believe was something similar to Good Morning, Dave.
Hello, is my microphone working?
Yes, we can hear you just
Spectacularly.
and the game was similar to a game I believe was an old-fashioned shooter called Defender, where you just go along, and that's where I first learnt the word thrust. It's like, oh, thrust. What does that word do? Push the button and it's like, my God, that's brilliant. Push, 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 push. Then I very quickly realized you only get 3 thrusts per life. Excuse me. And that was my earliest memory. All right, Dave and Zach, you can battle it out for who goes next.
Zach can go next. Let me put the milk in my tea.
Right.
Alright. The very first video game I ever played was actually on my grandmother's old computer. Because my parents didn't want me to have a video game system, so while the console wars were quietly raging in the streets, I was blind. I was blissfully ignorant. So my grandparents, they had a computer, and they had this. It was this old computer because my grandmother had it because she was a secretary, and on it there was one game. Now I remember it being called Space Goose, but apparently its real name is Star Goose. And I basically just used to play it consistently at my grandparents' house. No idea that apparently this game was um, apparently, according to stuff I've read, it's actually a really hard video game. I just played it blindly. I just played it ignorantly because I was just like, I was 4 years old. There were things exploding on the screen. I didn't care. I was moving the little tiny pixelated thing across the top, shooting at enemies that were trying to shoot me. It wasn't until I was about 6 years old that I grasped the concept of, oh, you have to collect these tiny jewels in order to move to the next level. And suddenly this game that was just endless was like, oh my god, there's levels! And then my grandparents got rid of the computer.
Right, and do you have a link for us?
Actually, I do. This is actually footage from the game. If I can get the YouTube doesn't actually work. Let's see. Now that's actual footage of the game.
I've never seen this before, but it seems very, very classic, like a classic game. Retro, that's the word. Like something that was shown on a classic retro game list.
Ah.
Okay, so it's a vertical scrolling shooter. Nice.
Yep.
One of my favorite retro genres.
And this game, I did some research prior to this. This game is apparently now abandonware.
Oh, okay.
So if you want, you can download it with no repercussions. So.
Okay. Oh, and also people can do replays on it with no repercussions of the original creators hunting down copyright or whatever.
Yes.
So, Dave, what is the likelihood of your flossy friend joining us?
Well, he's trying to join right now, and it's telling him he's not allowed to.
What?
He's getting video chat currently unavailable. No, the video call isn't available right now. Is the message he's getting?
What? So
Any idea why?
Oh, maybe I need to give him the link directly.
Maybe. I mean, I gave him the link, but I'm not the host, so maybe you do.
Is he on Google Plus?
Yeah, let me give him your. I don't know how to give people's contacts on Google Plus because I don't know how Google Plus works. Let me find out.
I don't think anyone knows how Google Plus works.
Sorry about this, listeners.
That's okay. While you're doing that, Dave,
yeah, someone talk about
your... Oh, I was going to say, Dave, why don't you tell us?
I will.
I'll talk about second earliest memory, and let's all do this up into modern day. My second earliest memory of video games was, now Dave, you and Brentalfloss did a song. I can hear my voice coming back from you, Dave.
Oh.
Right. Did a song, and one of the lines from that song was "Handheld gaming started here." I think the popularity of Game Boy popularized handheld gaming didn't so much start it, but it was indeed Nintendo that started it. They had a series of one-game-only games called Game & Watch. And in the Sydney International Airport in 1980, as my mother took me and my older sister over to England, because my mother's from England, so we were being taken over to meet the family, Mum thought, well, I'll get the kids something each to take on the plane to entertain them on the plane. I got what is now one of the most famous and sought after, and got stolen excuse me, in year 5, the famous game Fire, which is one of the most famous Game & Watch games. My sister got one that was not actually a Game & Watch game. The concept was the same: push buttons to do things, and there's LCD pictures. However, the game, if anyone out there can find it, was called Apple. You were a kid at the bottom with a basket, and you had to collect the falling apples and make sure the crow at the top didn't get them. That was not a Nintendo game. It was one of the best non-Nintendo Game & Watch rip-offs I've ever played, ever. So it may have been a Casio game, but they were different shaped. So yeah, over the years I ended up collecting quite a lot of Game & Watch games. Then of course, see, when everyone else had an NES, it was quite. I had a Dick Smith Wizard, which is very similar to the US ColecoVision. I then had a Commodore 16, not a Commodore 64, a Commodore 16. I then had a Commodore Amiga, and it was around that time that I got an NES, because in the stores the NES had dropped to quite a reasonable price of $134. So I thought, well, why not? We'll get it and game on it. Then that was really it. Then I got, the Super Nintendo. I was destined initially to get a Mega Drive for my birthday, because the Super Nintendo wasn't supposed to come out until after my birthday. But it ended up coming out about a week or 2 weeks before. So truly it was my destiny to have a Super Nintendo for my 16th birthday. The fates conspired to keep me in Camp Nintendo and not defect to Camp Sega. Yeah, so if anyone else wants to tell like a follow-up story?
I should probably preface my involvement with my relative lack of game experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll go with that. I do not have gaming experience on the level of almost everybody else of my generation that I've come across. I tend to have a very, very short attention span for video games. And I'm very much limited to classic titles, though I have played some key titles at their birth or their inception into the market. So I'll be a little bit of a passenger on this one, but I'll happily chirp in when I've got an opinion.
Okay. No worries. Zach, do you have like a follow-up story?
Kind of. I do remember I actually had a Sonic handheld pinball game when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And it was basically just something I got for like a birthday or Easter present, because they're just like, oh, it'd be something fun for the kid to have and for like road trips and whatnot. But I do remember when I was 6, for Christmas I got a Game Boy. Basically, it was smaller than the brick, but basically it was like the next like generation of the handheld. And
Game Boy Pocket.
Yes, the Game Boy Pocket, black and white, with the brightness control. Which, if you're a kid and you want to really want to have fun, you turn down the brightness to where basically the screen's next to black, and you just basically try and play Donkey Kong Country 2 when the screen's basically non-existent. But I do remember playing, because that was the time when Nintendo was porting a lot of the old NES games to Game Boy. A couple of them I still have packed away, but a lot of them I gave away. The Star Wars trilogy that was ported. Donkey Kong Country 2, which was a blast, especially when I got to be about 12 and I actually figured out how to play it. And then one of my favorites of all time, DuckTales.
Which has recently been re-released on all platforms. There he is. in HD, so 16 by 9. They've done the graphics up, and it's still exactly the same game. Good morning, Brentalfloss.
Hi, how's it going? Sorry for the misunderstanding about how to join the Google Hangout.
No worries.
It's very late where I am, so I'm going to be speaking into this mic that's right here in kind of a late night DJ version of my regular voice. So yeah, enjoy
Right.
that.
The misunderstanding was entirely mine. I said, "Hey, join us on this podcast," and then realized I don't know how to make that.
Well, thanks for having me. In any case, appreciate it.
No worries. Zach, were you finished with your story?
Yeah, because basically, DuckTales for the Game Boy is actually one of the few Game Boy games I still have left, packed away somewhere. But
Okay, Brent. How we always start these podcasts is with us each telling each other our earliest memories of this week's topic, and this week's topic is video games. So please share your earliest memories of video games.
Oh, that's easy. My dad, I think it was his idea to buy the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System, and he really enjoyed Duck Hunt. And so the first memories I have are watching my dad, who was at the time in his late 20s, becoming about my age mentally at the time, which is 3 or 4, playing Duck Hunt, and we all speculated about how it worked, how this magical light gun must work, and we all had theories. But then it must have been like once they all just got bored of it that I was like, well, I guess I'll try it. And of course, got addicted in a very serious way to the original Super Mario Brothers. And that would have been, like I said, around 3 or 4 years old. And yeah, I guess that's it.
Okay, do you have any sort of follow-up stories that got you even deeper down the rabbit hole of video games?
Well, yeah, I do remember, and this is a memory that I didn't really, it's a memory that didn't resurface until I started doing my YouTube videos where I add lyrics to video game tunes, and I remember I would get a song down and learn it so well after playing a level over and over again that I would start singing along and just making stuff up the way like a 5-year-old does. But I remember one time I realized that my dad must have been there in the room for at least a minute or two as I'd been doing my very vulnerable little kid singing along, and I was so mad at him being there, and he of course just laughed at me because it's funny when a kid gets upset. But yeah, I remember just being pissed off that he had not presented himself in a way that would have let me know to stop singing. And it's funny that that thing that made me so embarrassed then is now literally my career. So yeah.
Right, Dave, do you have any follow-up
Hi.
stories?
So, first of all,
wait,
good morning.
Yeah, you haven't told your original story, so yes.
Yeah. God, first. Well, I had, as I said in the song, LCD games before I had anything else. I think my first. Yes, I think I can remember probably my first, which was a King Kong game, not Donkey Kong, King Kong, and it was Google it. It was called King Kong Jungle. You might be able to find it. I think it was by Grandstand, as most of them were. And it was you were King Kong. There was a woman standing under a waterfall, presumably having a shower in the waterfall, and there were logs coming down the waterfall, threatening to land on her. And meanwhile, there were alligators or crocodiles or something coming along that way. So you've got logs coming down here, crocodiles coming down there, and a woman in the middle. And you were King Kong about there. And basically you had 2 buttons, which was grab the log, stamp on the crocodile. And you had to, and it got really fast, and you had to do it all in the right sequence, and it was honestly a really good game. And then I upgraded a bit to Thomas the Tank Engine, which was probably my favorite LCD game of all time. It was in color somehow. I don't know how they did that. And it was you had this complicated little map of like a railway, and you had to go around collecting bits of your friend James. Goodness knows what had happened to him. And there was all sorts of little obstacles everywhere. There were little carts coming after you. Some of them were on fire. You had to get water. You had to get oil if you ran low. There was a guy in a tractor started bulldozing towards you. You had to avoid him. It was very complicated, and it was absolutely wonderful. And I've just realised that I covered the music from both of those for your thing, Brent.
Yep, I've been waiting to slip that in since it is so pertinent all of a sudden.
You explain that.
Okay. So the short version of this story is I released an album in 2012, and it took too long to print. So suddenly I'd given out samples of the album, and there was going to be another month before it came out. So in order to combat piracy, I created a fake version in which the first 6 seconds of each song played, and then it switched over to one of my friends either berating the person for trying to pirate it, or in Dave's case, and I gave him no direction on this, I just said, do whatever, and he made an elaborate medley of LCD game, a cappella arrangements of LCD game tunes, and some of them like the like I could, because I listened to it quite a bit going, this guy just, if he goes in, he goes all in, like that was my feeling at the time. But yeah, and I remember the King Kong jungle ones, like the away, yeah. So they
and
got
of course,
stuck
in the actual game, all that tune was just. That's it. But I sort of elaborated it up with some jungle drums, which were, of course, just me banging on my desk.
Getting back to the LCD games, I just found an image of the LCD game Apple, and here it is. So if anyone, because I can't quite read what I'm assuming is the company name just above the crow.
It's something time, isn't it? But that's very, very clearly a rip-off of Game & Watch design.
Yes, very much so, whereas the other ones all have their own sort of unique design.
Yeah.
Is it screen share? Is that what I have to do to see that?
No, he's just posted the link in. There's a chat window you can open up.
Gotcha. Sorry, I'm still catching up.
Oh, it's available on eBay.
Everyone, viewers, be kind to me and Brent today, because it's 7:30 in the morning when I joined, and it's like what, 3 o'clock in the morning there now.
Yeah. By the way, since I'm on, is this? I'm sorry to say I'm not more familiar with the podcast because I'm always sleeping during it. But is there a link that I can put on Twitter to say if you're awake, watch this now, or is it recorded now and then played later?
We are live now, but I myself am not sure how to share the link live, so you'll just have to wait till after to share.
Yeah,
share
I
the
don't
YouTube
think
link.
you can share it live without people having to join it. If you see what I mean.
Okay, and I would avoid that at all costs at this point, personally.
So it's more of an afterwards thing. But I was being a bit unfair there, because those are LCD games, and I know you don't mean that. My actual first video games, one was Daley Thompson's Super Test on the ZX Spectrum, that was my actual first game. It was track and field, but sponsored with a decathlete, if that's the word, who was popular at the time in the UK. Certainly, I don't know if he was popular elsewhere. And that was a fun game, but my real first love, I think probably the earliest game that really affected me was, and this is a coincidence actually, because I've got some friends coming over today, and I'm gonna get them to see this game, is Popeye, but not the Popeye that you might be familiar with on the NES or in the arcade. It was a completely different game. It was made by a guy who made ZX Spectrum games, because that was in the day when games were made by a single person or a couple of people in a bedroom or whatever. And this game genuinely changed my life. And here's how. When I was in the shop, and my mum had said, you can have a game, because games were £4 in those days. They were cheap. And so I had a look, and there was two to choose from. One was Popeye, and one was Danger Mouse, based on the cartoon of the same name. And at first I was leaning Danger Mouse, and then it said something that made me... I can't remember. I just kind of wanted the Popeye one a bit more because of what it said on the back. And I can't remember the exact wording. I could go and get it, but it won't be interesting enough, so I won't bother. But it basically described it as like, you're Popeye, you're in a town, or wherever it is he lives, there's a lighthouse, there are buildings, there are doors, and all over the place, inside windows, behind things, on roofs, you are going to see hearts. And the trick is, how can you get them? How can you go and get these hearts? And this just spoke to me in some weird way. I just got this idea in my head of, oh wait, what if every window you can't get into that you pass in a town had something in it for you? If you just knew the way, if you knew what secret staircase to find, if you knew where the key was hidden that opens the door. And it just got me thinking in this way that I've never stopped thinking that way. And I think that it's one of the things that has influenced me as a cartoonist. And so I get this game home, and it's everything I could have hoped for. First off, I've only ever seen other games by this same guy look so colourful and strange on that particular computer. I mean, because usually games on the ZX Spectrum were like a little tiny white sprite bipping around on a 2 or 3 colour background. This was full colour. You had this giant Popeye. Different bits of him were different colours, which was more or less unheard of on the ZX Spectrum right up until the end of its existence. You've got right on the first screen, you've got Popeye standing in this, and again, anyone interested, go and have a look on YouTube. It is there. You've got Popeye standing in this archway. He's got a set of stairs he can walk down. If he does, olive oil pops out of a window. There's a door next to the window, but you can't go through it. You can jump backwards through the archway and be walking around behind her. Meanwhile, Bluto is walking around in the front. You have to avoid him. And there's a heart in a window above a door that you can see a staircase through, but it's locked. And so suddenly you're exploring this world. You're climbing up ropes. There's hearts hidden half behind things. You can't get anywhere because all the doors are locked and you can't find the keys. But these hearts are all over the place, and you have to collect them, then go back to Olive Oil and kiss her, and deposit the hearts in her. And this, as I say, I've got a video in the works, because whenever I see like a place where I think a heart would be, and a way to explain this to a younger gamer would be like, where in real life would a star be? Like a Mario Galaxy star or a Mario 64 star. Mm-hmm. I will take a little bit of film of it, and I one day will figure out how to like superimpose a sprite onto that video, and I'll make my video showing you how I see the world now, thanks to Popeye, which I used to play with my dad every night, and he could get much further than me. And I finally finished the game in, I believe it was February 2012. Maybe it could have been. You know what? It could have been longer ago than that. It could have been 2009 or anything like that. But I've recently finished the game essentially, and I had to use save states and cheat all the way through.
Right, and I still haven't finished the first Castlevania game from the NES. Mm-hmm. But now let's move on into the console wars. Whose camp were you in? And what circumstances led you to be in that? I mean, Brent said his dad bought an NES, so that would have initially put him in Camp Nintendo before he was even aware of any console wars. And I've been in Camp Nintendo because the Game & Watches were all Nintendo, and it's just a word that I noticed coming up a lot. So when I got the NES, I was like, oh, Nintendo. And Sega was just this other company that made games. I found out about the Sega Master System at my local video store. Because I'm like, oh, what are these? They look kind of like, because the cases for the Sega Master System were like mini video cases back then, and I hired one out and still preferred the NES.
Are you asking me?
I'm asking all of you.
Oh, well, you go ahead, Dave.
Me? I get. Sorry, Brent, it's tricky sometimes because I'm on a delay for those guys, and I imagine you are as well. So sometimes it can be like, it sounds like we're all talking over each other, but we're not.
Yeah.
Go on, Ian. Who should we do?
I guess, Brent first.
Okay, so I'm going to probably frame this conversation in a way that wouldn't have happened if Dave had gone. But so I, as a kid, subscribed to Nintendo Power, and you would see like they would publish these pieces of art that subscribers to the magazine sent in of things like Mario beating up Sonic. It was like propaganda, pro Nintendo, anti Sega, anti everything else. So growing up, I was like that. But then I got a Wii U. At the time, I was creating a webcomic twice a week with a team of co-writers and an artist. And I started making fun of the Wii U because I was disappointed in it, and I didn't realize that I was sort of like a card-carrying member of that party, and I had betrayed it. And I was like, but I don't like the Wii U all that much, especially in the first 6 months after it came out. People were like, oh, always bashing on Nintendo. Oh, what happened to you? So, like, this reminds me of how I grew up in Texas and then moved to New York City, and when I go back, people will be decidedly more Republican than I remember, and they'll notice that I'm not, like them. And it's like, oh, man, we have to take sides now? So, like, nowadays, when I hear people, and I know that this is, somewhat tongue-in-cheek and not serious, but there are some people that, like, if you say you roll PS4 and not Xbox One, it's like you brought up abortion, right after meeting someone. It's like you went straight there. And they're like, okay, well, we don't have to talk about that, or whatever. Like they just can't know that about you. So to me, in my heart of hearts, the adult in me likes the PS4. The kid in me likes Nintendo as a concept. I've never been much for the Xbox, but it's clearly it's got some stuff to offer. So I'm gonna just say I'm an independent, if that's all right.
Fair enough. Yeah, okay. So, Dave, it's your go.
You're not happy with that. you need a strong stance to be taken, do you?
You need to pick a side.
you are the, what is it Switzerland? Sweden? The neutral one. Who's the neutral party in Europe?
Netherlands, right?
Oh, yeah, Netherlands. You are the Netherlands of the gaming community.
That's me.
Right, Dave.
Okay, so I was also relatively neutral, I'm afraid. I think I swung Mega Drive more, but it wasn't. We absolutely had the console wars here, and I think we had them, I would say, perhaps more than in America even, because in America, Nintendo won. Like, that was a clear, you know what I mean? That they were the winners, and then there was Sega were like the tryhards. Here, it was a lot more even, and you really could kind of get away with either of those. Hold on. Okay.
Texting?
Yeah. So, basically, I was more... Because I was a kid, so it wasn't about, is it Sega or is it Nintendo for me? Although I did join in with that, and I was like, depending on the day of the week, it's Sega, it's Nintendo. No, it was, is it Sonic or is it Mario for me? And Mario got me first. Did it? Yes, I think, yes, it did, because we had Mario Brothers on the ZX Spectrum, not Super Mario Brothers. They actually like officially released Mario Brothers on it, and there was an LCD game that someone in my family had, which was Mario's Cement Factory. Still love that game.
I still have that somewhere.
Oh, I'll buy yours off you. And there's what was it? There was the cartoon, of course. So I knew the character first. I think Sonic got its hooks in me as a game first. When that came out, there was this shop which I am still... There are a few things in the world that I'm still angry don't exist anymore. One of them is children's programs on Saturday mornings. And I remember the day the BBC axed its children's morning in favour of cookery shows in about 2005, and I'm still livid. And the other is Children's World, a beautiful, wonderful superstore for kids, and it was, don't think Toys R Us. Think Toys R Us, but more useful for mum than that, and more of a day out than that. So they had toy areas. They had, video area. They had games area, board games area, and then they had a soft play area that you could just essentially dump the kids in while you go and do the shopping. That had cartoons playing on screens. There was an area where you could get your hair cut. There was a cafe. The way to get in was down a helter-skelter. That was the way into the shop. It was amazing. And they had this, in the early days anyway, they had this setup of different consoles. And they had Super Mario Brothers, and they had a Game Gear with Mickey's Castle of Illusion. So I guess I kind of, for some reason, I just played Castle of Illusion a bit more. And then they installed their Mega Drive, and they had Sonic. And the first time I played that, oh my god, it honestly was love at first sight. There was this advert on at the time, which was, once you've played Sonic the Hedgehog, everything else seems a little bit slow. And I just took this entirely to heart, and I played the game, and I'd never played anything as fast as that. So I thought. Of course, I bet if you measured it, Super Mario Brothers is probably faster. But once I'd played that, I was running laps of the store, and it was this huge, it was like a Toys R Us size big sort of, hangar-style shop. And I was running around, going up the lift, running around upstairs, down the stairs, round and round. I was the fastest kid on earth that day. And so that was it for me. And so I basically, after that, got a bit obsessed with Sonic because it was elusive. We couldn't afford one. We didn't have a console. So instead, I would go round to friends' houses and record the music. That was my way of connecting with these things. I went to first Robert's and then later Mike's house. First by just at Robert's house, he was the first person I knew who had a Mega Drive. We just put his tape recorder near the TV and recorded the music. And I listened to that all the way to Games Master Live, a big gaming expo that my parents randomly took me to for some reason. So that kind of got its hooks in me. And then later on, it just so happened that in the UK, the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise was taken over by Virgin Interactive, who I think the people from that went, is it Virgin Interactive, Virgin, some branch of Virgin? And they, I was recently informed, went on to essentially be Sega Europe. And they just ran the franchise better than anyone else. Over here in the UK, we had stuff they didn't have in America or Japan. We had these novels were coming out, which were good. They were well, not good. You wouldn't put it in front of your parents and say, "Hey, read this wonderful book." But they were funny. They put effort into them. There was quite convoluted time travel stories. It was quite well made. And then the comic came out, and that was good. And so by the time I actually got my Mega Drive, which was years later, in about 2000, in 1994 or 5, I think it was the Christmas of '94 I finally got it. That was me kind of hooked. But in the meantime, in about 1992, my friend got a NES, and we really got into Mario. So if you see what I mean, I kind of got into both of those things equally, and by the time I was able to have any of these machines, I was obsessed with them all. And so I was pretty non-partisan, as it were.
Indeed. Brent, take us through the story of how you ended up doing what you currently do on YouTube.
Oh, okay. I will try to hit the important points so that we will eventually get on to another topic before next week. Okay. What a long story. Okay, so I grew up liking music, started playing piano out of nowhere. Dave's heard this story. He's going to go do something else. All right.
He's British. He's getting more tea.
That's a great point. At some point I'm going to have to refill the coffee. But so I grew up very musical. Started writing my own melodies and songs around age 12. Started writing lyrics just shortly thereafter. And I thought I wanted to do musical theater from a performance perspective. Then I thought I wanted to do it from a writing perspective. Then I thought I wanted to teach drama. And along the way, kind of got a little bit of skills in all these different things, and also music arranging, which I did a lot in high school on my little keyboard. And I actually went to undergrad for acting, then went to grad school in a very small Hogwarts-like program for musical theater writing, because I was sure I was going to write the next Broadway show. And right after graduating, I was teaching a summer arts youth course in Ardmore, Oklahoma, and had very little to do outside of the 2 hours of teaching a day. And I just had the Mega Man 3 song stuck in my head. I had a new MacBook that had built-in camera, built-in editing software, and all of this other stuff as well. So I was like, okay, well, you know, Mega Man 3 has a great title theme, and why not add lyrics? I'm teaching kids how to write lyrics. This should be an easy thing to do. And I went through a few drafts, and the first draft was a complete non sequitur, but then I started to go, no, what if I make it about Mega Man? What if I make, you know, and then when it was done, I was like, you know, I've got this software. So it was really just a test run to see if I could put a decent little video together. It was really to amuse me, and it was the first YouTube video I'd done that wasn't specifically trying to get attention. It was more of just something that I thought was funny, and lo and behold, it took off. That was Mega Man 3 with lyrics, summer 2008, and so I kept doing that as a hobby while still pursuing musical theater. And in 2010, I released the first Brentalfloss CD around the same time my first off-Broadway show, my only off-Broadway show, premiered. And so, I mean, really in a very, very small cluster of time, my off-Broadway show flopped, like just textbook flopped. The New York Times guy, they got the New York Times guy, #1 reviewer of theater in the country, to come see it, and he gave us a very non-cruel bad review. But at this exact same time, my little album of parody songs about video games was charting on iTunes. So it was this thing of like, well, New York's expensive. Musicals take a long time. YouTube videos take less time. I'll try this, and it's been a full-time job ever since. And I do plan to go back to theater one day, but I also feel like I get to work with music and lyrics. I get to work with storytelling. I get to kind of take on characters I already love and people already know. So it's a pretty cool – substitute is a word I don't want to use, but it's a pretty cool version of what I thought I was going to do, you know? So hope that wasn't too much of a ramble. That's how I got here.
No, that was actually about right. Not too long, not too short. And
I get that a lot, you know. It's,
yeah.
I've got a music-related.
Okay.
Because everybody here except Zach, although correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, because this might be terribly rude, but everyone here except Zach is a musician of some sort. You're not a musician, Zach? Is there a secret ukulele back there somewhere?
No.
Nope. So he's gonna check. No, I'm curious.
Nope, just a stack of trace paper. So.
Architects. Now I'm curious as we talk about the actual music in the video game. So we've talked about the stories and the characters being an influence, but the actual music, the chords and the melodies that are in these games, I mean, obviously they're a huge influence for Dave, but for everybody else, has it had a dramatic impact on, you know, what you actually produce when you make music? Because when I was doing my first round of study, at the end of it, I'd just purchased an Xbox and I was playing Fable. And my partner at the time and I were both composing, and everything that we composed at that point in time came out either sounding like the soundtrack to Fable or a soundtrack to an anime that we were watching at the time. And despite all of the training that I'd had over since I was a 5-year-old kid in all these different styles of music, when it came time to compose my final, whatever you want to call it, dissertation piece or whatever, it came out sounding like a game soundtrack, despite the fact that I didn't really play games. I wasn't a gamer at all. I didn't grow up with them, but it sounded like the theme music for Fable. Has it ever happened to anyone else?
Brent, Brent, you are back.
Sorry about that. I was really excited about the first 3 words of that topic, and then cut out. But I'm back now. You were talking about the music of video games. That's what I got to.
Okay.
Right. I'll paraphrase really quick.
Yep.
I'm a musician. Ian's a musician. I'm a professional musician. Ian's a musician. Dave's a musician. You're a musician. Basically, I was telling this cute little story about my first round of study, and we had to compose our final graduating piece, and I happened to be playing Fable at the time. I need to preface this for both Dave and Brent. I'm not a gamer. This is not my thing. I dabble. I'll play for a few days, and then I won't touch it for years on end. I was composing, and my partner at the time were composing furiously, and we handed these works in, and they both sounded exactly the same as the soundtrack to Fable or the soundtrack to a particular anime series we were watching at the time, despite the fact that, years of classical training and jazz bands and heavy metal albums that we, composed and performed. When it came time, it was that immediate, constant cycling music from playing the game that got stuck in my head. Have you ever gone to write something, wanted to write something, and then at the end of it gone, it's bloody Super Mario Brothers theme backwards or something like that?
I have a very pertinent answer to this question because I, last December, was about to break up with the entire Brentalfloss brand and pursue a career of writing video game music. And long story short, it didn't work out. I couldn't make a business model out of it that worked, but I still occasionally do that, and I did that tonight. This guy who I had promised with, basically I talked him down from the whole soundtrack to his game all the way down to just the title theme because I just don't have the time, and it doesn't make me money. But point being, his game is a 16-bit style side scroller, and so I was like, well, what do you want it to sound like? And he was like, well, like Cave Story and Mario. And I'm like, okay, I can absolutely do those things. And the Cave Story bit doesn't sound like Cave Story, but it has that same kind of minor key, cool, like semi-spooky, semi-mysterious, jazzy, funky feel. But then the part that, like the B section where it goes into a major key and it's suddenly happy, I still haven't quite figured it out. But like he likes it and I like it, but there's something in there that's absolutely lifted, like at least a whole like melodic phrase, like a hooky phrase that's just like, and the hardest part is knowing that it's not yours and not knowing where it comes from, but it's not yours. It's extremely frustrating, but also kind of fun because once you get past the point where everything you write is precious and untouchable, and you start to be a little more cynical and a little bit more flexible about that, it's really not that hard to just go in and go, okay, well, I can change this, and it won't really be that different. It'll just be different to the version of me that knew the other version, but nobody else will know that. So, but yeah, short answer is absolutely that happens all the time.
Mm-hmm. Zach, as an architect, have you ever drawn anything or imagined something that thought, hang on, this is from a video game? Or
have you ever tried to design a building and it turned out to be just a drawing of Luigi?
This hospital looks very much like Wario. What did I do?
I can definitely say that video games did influence my perceptions of architecture. By definitely like what could be what I could do, because I remember playing what was that? I remember just like sometimes I'd be sitting down and I'd draw something and I'd be like, wow, this looks so familiar, I can't figure it out, and then I'm playing a video game, just like it's that same feeling, that's just like, wait a minute, this looks just like this house I passed in Fable or something to that effect. Definitely, I'd have to say, just as a little kid, my perceptions of design and architecture were anything was possible. Mm-hmm. 4 years of undergrad and a year of grad school basically shot that notion dead and buried it back behind the shed. But I would say video game. Yeah, it really hasn't happened yet. I mean, just when I'm drawing, just doodling for my own brain space, I've got 5 minutes between classes, and I pull out my sketchbook and draw something. I'm like, oh, this is from that, or just drawing up like a city plan or something for fun. and I realize, holy crap, it looks like the world map from this. And I'm like, oh, great. But actually, this does relate to music, though. A lot of times when I'm designing, I will actually have music playing in the background, and it varies from time to time. A lot of times it's like anime openings or reviews that I'm listening to, Let's Plays, and occasionally, one day, I actually was working and I had the entire Bioshock album playing. I had found it. I'd found I typed in Bioshock on YouTube, and somebody had actually oh, here's the full soundtrack, and so I had it playing in the background on YouTube, and it was just interesting how when listening to that was all of a sudden I was actually drawing a little bit faster and working a little bit faster on the computer. But so, and I can't actually say this about video game music. One night I could not fall asleep, and usually I listen to something to try to help me fall asleep, to help me relax, because my mind is always going. And one night I just could not fall asleep. I was 15, and I was like, I really need something soothing to listen to. And so I fished through a drawer, and I found a little my Game Boy, and I'm like, oh, hey, you're still here. And it was fully charged. And I grabbed the first cartridge I could, and I'll just listen to the title music, put it in, looked at it very briefly, and was like, that'll do. Booted it up, and 8-bit all of a sudden, deet, 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 deet. And I'm just like, okay, whatever, I'll fall asleep. And I fell asleep to the 8-bit DuckTales theme. But as far as design goes, video games are... I actually did do a presentation for a class on video game architecture for only about 2 minutes. I was there's a program we use called Revit, which is a 3D modeling program, which you basically say, oh, wall, door, and build this. And our first assignment was to design a floating city. And my professor's just like, I went to my professor and I said, I've actually played a video game with a floating city. And he's like, really? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, why don't you present on it? Just show the kids show the other students what they can actually do with this. And I pull up and I get in front of the class, plug in my laptop, and I'm just like, so our assignment's supposed to be floating city, and I'm just like, click. This is Columbia from Bioshock Infinite. And I went through like 5 slides, just explaining very briefly about the notion of floating architecture, and which was very interesting.
So you're in a class and you've gone, hey, I play a game, and the guy's like, okay, come up to the front, and you had slides prepared.
It was the next day. It was for the next class. He actually why don't you throw together a couple of slides, and I was playing Bioshock Infinite at the time. But I will actually, as the only architect amongst my small group of friends, I'll actually be playing video games, and I'll actually analyze the architecture of oh, this is what this is. This is how they're doing this. How could this actually be built? And I'll actually have friends randomly out of the blue be playing a video game and say, "Is this possible?" And I'm just like, I'm just like, do you see engineer anywhere on my shirt? No. I'm just like, then stop asking.
Yeah, but there are some games where you can tell that it wouldn't, okay, Deus Ex Human Revolution, loved that game, but it seems like in the future, air ducts are really meant for walking through more than for getting air to circulate in a way that would be conducive to airflow.
That is actually something I can say from a mechanical engineering class I took. A professor brought up a thing, and basically the average air duct is about that.
Gotcha.
And
Not so much a good walking space, free of dust and bugs.
No. I did actually. I played Spec Ops.
People walk through air ducts and things. They don't even put dust everywhere. There'd be huge amounts of fluff in there, surely.
Absolutely. Air filters,
yes.
bugs, rats. Yeah,
Um,
and I mean, there was an air duct in our theater building in high school that had all these spikes in it. Like one time we were going to be like, "Let's go in there, yeah," and then we just look in and it's this death trap of spikes on the side. Probably because they foresaw this and went, "Let's make sure that if they go in there, they die." 'Cause yeah, so none of that in games, I guess.
yeah,
Um,
and I mean, I'll actually like I'll be playing a game. Like I said, I'll analyze the architecture. Definitely playing Dead Space 2 as an architect is really weird because I'm just like, why did they put this here? Why is the school located in the middle of the apartment complex? And I'm just like, whatever. Whatever. I'm just trying to get around the exploding babies. But,
You see,
Can I
that-
say it almost makes sense to put a school in an apartment complex? That way the children have less far to travel to go home or to school. It's like you
yes,
leave
but
and you get up the stairs and you're home.
at the same time, the facilities, the noise control. Granted, I'm analyzing a game where a giant space statue brings people back from the dead, and then they made the third one and completely retroed everything. Um, yeah, but
these are not the
definitely-
questions that the designers expected us to ask, I believe.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, the only game where I've ever played where I didn't ask a question about the architecture was Spec Ops: The Line,
Huh.
which
But I-
was set in Dubai. Which, as anyone who's played, it's set in Dubai. And as an architect, for the first few years of my education, everyone looked at Dubai as it's this beautiful thing. It is this perfect blank slate. And that's like the first 2 years of my education. They're like, it's a perfect blank slate of architecture. There was nothing there before except for the locals. And then everybody got a bunch of money, and they started building the tallest things in the world. And then the third year, we start analyzing city planning, and we suddenly all hit that realization that, holy crap, this is the greatest hedonist project in the history of forever. The whole purpose this place exists is because everyone has money. And so...
That's why it's called Dubai.
Yeah.
Oh, Dubai.
Exactly. But playing that game and just seeing and basically seeing all the destruction of the sand going in, I had actually taken a class about apocalyptic landscape architecture. And so playing this... Yes.
Awesome.
And so we're playing this game. I'm playing this game, and I'm just sitting there, I'm just like, this makes total sense. The buildings are completely overtaken by the landscape, and it's basically nature reclaimed Dubai. And I'm just like, this actually makes perfect sense why sand is this. And it was the first time that I'd really not thought about my own field playing a game, because going into it, I was just like, this makes perfect sense. Granted, there's some extreme liberties taken with... I'm pretty sure that the plate glass would have already cracked because of the pressure, but just playing it through, I was just like, wow, this actually makes sense. And I'm just like looking at it apocalyptically and the way the landscape is, and like, wow, this fits. Then I get to the very end, and I start feeling really bad for actually picked up the game, because the game continually is telling me, this is all your fault. And every loading screen keeps telling me, those people died because it was all your fault. But, oh yeah, sorry. Spoiler. But, yeah. But as far as influencing my own designs, unfortunately, I'm grounded in so much reality that I can't really separate myself from it. But
I'm just grounded in so much reality.
It's probably
Yeah.
good, if you were a level designer, that would be bad. But since you're an architect of real world things, that's good.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
separating too much, you don't want to have big green pipes showing up in your lobby.
Yes, you do.
There was
Actually,
a
if
game.
I were to do that, I would actually, if I were to design something for Nintendo, like if I was to design a Nintendo headquarters, in the lobby there would be a row of columns that would all be green pipes, and as you walked by them, they would make the warp sound. I would actually talk with the engineer that when you walk past certain ones, it would go doop, 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 and it would actually make the warp.
Look, if you're designing an HQ for Nintendo, don't have doors, just have pipes. You know what I mean? Wouldn't that be great? If all the doors in Nintendo were like sideways green pipes.
But if they had to have doors, you have to shoot them with a missile, and they'll go.
Yes.
Right. I didn't answer the question before, and I just want to say that I have indeed fallen into the trap of accidentally writing game tunes. I've absolutely done that. Because I don't. This isn't, on YouTube when I've done songs, it's always been sort of a cappella covers of things. But I've written original songs now and then, and probably about 90% of the time they've turned out to be from games.
Right.
There was one time when it wasn't. I came up with a song that had this really cool intro, and it was just really cool, and I loved it. And then Dad just put on this tape of like soul music classics, and there it was. I'd 100% just heard it in my sleep and lifted it and just copied it and put it down. I was like, damn it, that's that song I just came up with that I'm really happy about. There was there's sort of multiple times when I've come up with something, and it's not that you write the song and it is you've written the Zelda theme tune or something, but it often happens where, and this isn't just for games fans, this presumably happens to you guys for just music you've heard, you'll realize that this chord sequence you've come up with that is your hook and you love it. Oh, it turns out it's because it's from this or that, or you know what I mean? That must happen all the time, right?
Chords, like a chord structure, like E minor, A minor, B, whatever, you cannot copyright a chord structure.
No, you can't, but what you can do, for example, there's one song that and I'm going to just go ahead and do this anyway because of that, but like, there's one song that I've come up with that I think is quite a pleasant, I think it's quite a pretty song. I came up with quite a sincere sounding song once, and I've never recorded it or done anything with it because I realized that that a chord sequence in it, one of them, is from a game. And the thing is, yeah, I can still do that, but everyone will know, because it's me, where I got that from. So, you know what I mean? I can't be sued for it, but it can be pointed out, and people can go, you've just nicked that, or whatever. So it is something you have to be aware of, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, for me to answer that question, music in my mind takes precedence over video games and always has. The thing is, when people hear my songs, I've never actually done it specifically where a melody is just so unbelievably similar. It might as well be the Mario theme or Zelda theme, whatever. But I've done music to the point where people sound like, oh, that sounds like it's from, this franchise of games. It sounds like it's from Zelda, or it sounds like it's from Final Fantasy, but still being unique and true to themselves as their own original compositions.
Yeah.
But
at that point, you can release that. You can release that as a tribute to Final Fantasy or whatever, and you can get some sales on that, on the basis of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. To the point where my music is so that people just. I wrote a song years ago as part of a college course that I was doing. It was a contemporary music certificate for, and it had the lyrics, but I eventually dropped the lyrics because it had a title. I completely forget what the original title was, and everyone said, "Oh, it sounds like it's something from a video game." The people said that so much that I thought, you know what, I'm changing the title, and the title is now Once Upon a Video Game, which was the better title. And if you don't mind, can you guys hear me play the piano? I'll play just a few bars. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hang on a sec.
Yeah, I can hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a bit video game, and it's a bit. Well, I don't
It
know
sounds
exactly.
more. If you hear the MIDI of it and you just hear the MIDI with like MIDI sound fonts, it sounds much more video game than hearing it on an
Sure.
electric piano.
Well, that's cheating. I mean, if you play it in 8-bit samples or whatever, then it's going to sound even more like it. But no, I was going to say that sounds like something between like a video game and what am I thinking of? Like Gummy Bears or something. So it's a bit sort of cartoon theme tuney.
Oh, okay.
The first
Well,
bit, anyway.
there's another one I wrote that I was just mucking around with, but as I heard it, I thought this sounds like a villain theme. Like it's the final boss battle, which is whoops. And basically just that forever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that sounds like a good boss tune, or like a chase level or something like that.
Yeah, I imagine that as like the final boss. Although the final boss would be
So the
more.
funny thing is, when you were saying music, obviously as a musician, obviously music is your thing over video games. For me, and this is presumably, and this is probably true for you as well, Brent, where you end up being a musician who works with gamesy-based stuff.
Mm-hmm.
My reason for that.
That's what it says on my business card, actually.
It does. I've seen it. Gamesy-based stuff. My reason for that, I suspect, is going to be similar to yours, which is that, like, growing up, when you play a game, if you look back, the music kind of left more of an impression than any other aspect in a lot of games.
Well, because I totally agree, and I have this little spiel that I'll do the short version of here, which is that video game music is, in a way, an unprecedented genre, because it's not something you passively listen to once in a symphony hall and remember later and listen to on the Vitrola. It's not a movie score that you only get in the real time of the movie as it goes. It's the music of not only your journey through that game, but your life at that time, because especially the old stuff where it's 45-second loops in a game that you play for 30 hours. So it's just the way in which it burns into your brain gets a little bit deeper than that. It's almost like smelling something and going, oh, that's Grandma's house. That thing that just takes you back.
Yeah.
I think video game music, because you actively receive it as you go on a journey, even though millions of other kids went on the same journey in the same game, it's still very personal to you.
So what you're saying is video game music is the soundtrack to your life.
Exactly, in a way that even an album that was like, oh, that album is so summer 1995, it's not quite the same because, there's a specific thing you do in order to listen to that music while you're doing it. It's not like I could be driving in the car, I could be walking down it's very specific, and because it's a community, much like, I have a musical theater background, and if anybody else was in a particular musical when they were in school, and you were too, if one of you breaks out in the song, the other's like 76 trombones and the big parade, like you just both know it, and you're in that community, even if you weren't in the show together. And video games have that same kind of thing where the music creates a community of people that all went through the same thing, even
That's right.
All over the world, far away.
And I said something similar to that. I think I said it in my show the other day. I intended to anyway. Where, which is that game tunes are kind of like a blown up version of cartoon theme tunes for kids, because for kids when we were kids anyway, because everyone could sing the Turtles theme, and everyone could sing Thundercats and He-Man and Ghostbusters and things like that. And that was because with a lot of those cartoons, you watched the cartoon because the theme tune was good. Even if you didn't realize it, that was why you did, right? Because there were some cartoons that were terrible, but the intro was brilliant. And with games, it's a similar thing. You have this piece of music that's just associated with that whole time. And exactly as you say, Brent, you have to be playing the game to hear the tune. You have to be hearing the tune to play the game, to a lesser extent, but you kind of did. And so It really affects you. But the thing is, there were games which I thought were good games, and looking back, it was the music that was good. And there were games where the music was. I just think music. I just think it gets you slightly, or maybe it was just me, but it gets you in a slightly stronger way than some of the other things a game presents to you. And that is reflected in the fact that the best games tended to have the best music, and so either they understood that, or it was just a coincidence, or it was that the music made the game what it was in a way. And like, I mean, I've already said this was why I got into Sonic. The music in Sonic 1 was a revolution. I had not heard anything like that in games up until that point, and it holds up now, and I can listen to it and go, yeah, this is good. But then it was magic, like proper. Like I remember having this. It was one of the first things that made me feel like nighttime was a thing. I know that's a weird thing to say, but the music in Sonic somehow did that. Obviously, I'm talking about the zones, the levels where that was the point, the Starlight Zone and things like that. But the music really did do that. It got it right. And so as someone who didn't have this game to play, but was able to see it occasionally and hear the music, and then go home with the music on tape to listen to and think about that experience again, you were sort of you were feeling the game more than you were genuinely experiencing it. So my Sonic 1, for instance, is probably not the real game. It's probably not what anyone else experienced. It's this weird Fantasia-style like musical journey that I went on, and so yeah, they can affect you. Now there were some musicians working in games who were just great, and sometimes they would be tucked away on hidden things. Me and Brent have talked about this before, but there's a brilliant chap called Tim Follin who did the music for a game called Solstice, and the music is more famous than the game, I would say now, and it's better by a long way. Like the game was fine, the game was good, but the music was brilliant. Like it's like if someone made the title music to Solstice now using a NES chipset or whatever as a demo scene thing, we'd all be going like, "This is amazing!" now. And the fact that this guy was essentially working relatively anonymously in games, and then stopped because there was no money in it, because he had to, not because he abandoned it or anything. There just was it wasn't a job he could continue to do because games changed and so on. That is so interesting that there were brilliant musicians out there. Over in the NES world, there was a game called Low G Man, which is not very well known, but that had a brilliant soundtrack. Not as good as Solstice, but it was better than the average beeps. And these things stick with you, and you remember them, and you hear them, and they take you back, and you want to play the game, and sometimes you're disappointed. I've tried playing Low G Man a few times, and I just can't be bothered. It's not a good enough game to really hook me. But the music, I love. And there's all sorts of games like that,
I want to take a quick moment to let you guys in on something that I think is pertinent. Because we're talking about music, we're talking about video games. Zach, you brought up Dead Space. And I just had an inkling of an idea that kind of bubbled up here and there over the course of the last 10 minutes. But I'm going to basically pitch you what I think my Halloween video might be. Because I've been looking for a Halloween video, and I just realized Dead Space, constantly, nothing's happening, and then monsters race toward you out of nowhere. And I thought it might be funny if, it's like Isaac's birthday. That's the one thing you didn't know about the game. It's his birthday, and he thinks nobody's remembered. And the monsters just keep on coming out with, badly photoshopped cone hats and confetti falling, and they're like, "Surprise!" And that's just the hook of the song. It's like this, really fast, silly bluegrass, and they're like, "Surprise! Oh, you guys remembered, surprise!" I don't know if it's that funny. It's extremely late here, but I think it might work.
Well, like the way that zombies say "Happy Birthday" is to run at you.
Well, yeah, because in the game they're like deformed corpses. I mean, if you played it, Dave, it's like horrific.
No,
not quite zombies, more like super deformed Brundlefly beasts. But they will come. They'll just charge you, explode out of a a wall, and then there's light coming from behind them, and then like if you don't shoot them immediately, they will eat you. But like if I just took that moment where like they come out of nowhere, just do that over and over again with increasingly silly monster voices like surprise and surprise, like they're clearly about to eat you. I don't know. I'm delirious. It's late, but I think Zach, you might have inadvertently been, you know, been the cell that got into the egg of my brain. What did you say, Dave?
The architect of that idea.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Indeed, all of our best ideas come in the middle of the night.
Absolutely.
Castlevania, I think, is one of the more famous games that's famous for its music. And certainly the Castlevania Adventure on the Game Boy Advance is not a good game, except for the music. It's the music that makes you play it, because it's so good. But I've recently gone about... It's better than you think, because I've recently gotten into VST, which is Virtual Studio Technology with super lifelike samples, gotten MIDIs, of very accurately done MIDIs that were transcribed by whoever, and then put these super accurate samples, the harp, the trombone, the whatever. I'm like, my God, this sounds like period accurate, the kind of music that you would be listening to in that time, which I thought was fantastic. And I think probably another game series, probably Final Fantasy. I mean, they do world tours with live orchestras, their music, and there's one game that one of its best, and it's an excellent series, one of its best components by far is the soundtrack, and it was a European game, and I think a German composer, and that game is Super Turrican, the Turrican franchise, if we're all familiar with it. The music in that series is, like, phenomenal. If you're not familiar with it, please absolutely check it out. It's the sort of thing I would have expected Brent to have done it with lyrics by now.
Yeah,
but,
I'm still getting to most of the franchises that exist, but I actually am not familiar with this one. Super Turrican, you said?
Yes, Turrican.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, brilliant. But I think the composer he's a bit, he's not big and loud, and he sort of doesn't like people doing things of his songs, so it might be interesting to do something of one of his songs and see the reaction you get from the guy, or if it even reaches his attention.
I'd love that.
Well, that would be awesome.
I rarely communicate with the composers. I only have twice, and both times it's been positive, but only because they knew what I do. You know what I mean? Like somebody who had no clue. Yeah. Who knows if they, but like I'd love to infuriate a German because I, made a fun song out of his music from 20 years ago. That'd be great.
And I have actually recently combined both of my passions of video game. I have made my very own video game, which I've played on my channel. It is called, and I had a song that, like, it was drums and tried to sound like balls bouncing, because that's what the game's all about. But then I dug up one of my old songs from years and years ago. I'm like, this is a much happier, catchier, more that sort of tune that people will hate for the right reasons, because it's just so boppy and lively and lovely. And there is a link to it right there, wallpopper.me. So if you ever want to check that out at any point to hear the music, as I said, it's very lively, very fun, very sort of like NES retro kind of a thing. Where did Dave go?
It's a great question.
But music has just become such a phenomenal part of the video gaming industry, where now Mario Kart 8, the soundtrack, was recorded live in the studio. Mm-hmm. It was not samples and whatnot. They actually hired musicians. And those musicians, when you get to lap 3 and the music's suddenly faster, those musicians actually playing that music faster.
I didn't think about that, but I guess that's right. There was one part of Mario Kart 8, the soundtrack of which I almost universally loved, where I have a theory. The level is called Shy Guy Falls. And
I love that level. Yep.
It's great, isn't it? And it's got a great hook, but I didn't ever quite hear the totality of it till I went to YouTube and listened to it isolated without any of the other sound effects. And there's a part at which the fiddle slash violin player seems to kind of go off on his own, and I can't tell if they awkwardly cut between two different takes, or if it's just not a very good improvisation. But there's one little bit where you really feel like he could have nailed it better, and it's actually a little weird. And I'd love to know the story behind it, because to me, like what I think was written on paper is one of my favorite Mario cartoons. But that one part, when you listen to it in isolation, you're like, gosh, they really could have. I mean, were they like on the clock? They had to take the first take and just keep going, or what? But might be something to check out for any video game music nerds out there who haven't quite caught it, because I may be wrong, but it just seems like one of those, like, take it, Steve, or take it, Yoshi, or whatever, and the guy like suddenly goes, oh, okay, and kind of biffs it a little bit, but in an otherwise perfectly performed song. I don't know, something to look into.
Speaking of Mario Kart 8, probably the more I play it online, the less I like it as a track. But I still love the music, and that I don't know what the dolphin underwater one.
Oh yeah, I know which one you're talking about.
And just as you come out of the water, that saxophone line comes on. That I love that piece of music.
The first time I heard that, it reminded me very much of the 1980s and 1990s Saturday Night Live intro theme, and I was trying to make my girlfriend laugh every time I would come out of the water and hear that. I'd be like, "It's Mario Kart Live," because there's so many things when you get into real instrumentation and it's no longer beeps and boops. If they nail a certain sound, it can be like it's a strange thing to feel like you're being transported to a genre that you never associated with game music, but it's in your game now. I don't know. I'm still getting used to that. I think Mario Galaxy was the first time I really noticed, oh, this is symphonic. This is clearly real instruments, and it is very much a qualitatively different thing. Even though it's great, it's like there's something just after maybe 26 or 27 years at that point of hearing beeps and boops. It was almost too lush. It was almost like the snow cone syrup rather than the snow cone. To hear an orchestra, and I guess a similar situation to that would be Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII, where after a game that really didn't have any sampled instruments, you hear a real choir, and it's haunting and scary, and you don't know. It's like jarring, but also inevitable and perfect. There's no other way it could have been once you hear it that way. Anyway, it's quite a ramble I'm going on. Somebody should cut me off.
Matty he lives down in Sydney. He's trying to assemble I think anime cover group, or anime and video game cover group. Is this correct, or is it strictly anime?
I guess it's just pop culture in general.
Right.
I always lament the lack of musicians at the conventions that we have around here. So we were at Supernova. There was that one group of young guys playing his little Nord synthesizer, and they were rocking out some various classic game themes. But yeah, I always lament the lack of decent bands. I mean, there's ABBA's covers bands. Why can't we have a Mario covers band? What's wrong with that?
In the university that I used to attend down there's anime groups, and I know they have music sessions. So you need to look out for those guys. Maybe I'll hook you up through Facebook or something. But just getting back to cartoons that we watched because we enjoyed the theme. One cartoon that I didn't watch that I did dislike enough to know that it was not for me was Spartacus and the Sun Beneath the Sea. And to this day, I love that theme tune. And I still don't like the cartoon because I tried watching it on YouTube. But I would be happy just to sit there, like, as a kid, if we had to go out as a family or whatever. No, I just want to listen to this theme. Okay, theme's over, let's go.
That was your happy place.
Yes. And I love the baseline of it. Yeah. Oh, well, if it was a game, especially if it was a Game Boy game, I could have just taken it with me, plugged in the earphones, and off I go. But there's something, I guess, nostalgic about those bleeps and bloops. that I can recognize because my mum and my sister are often like, oh, it just sounds like video game music, whereas I was actually appreciating the core of the music, the melody, the chord, the meter and rhythm, and all of that.
Well, I mean, this is something that's happened during to our generation is that like those beeps were there by necessity, but we've come to love them. And what's interesting is that you had people like the Tim Follins that I mentioned before who even at the time were going, all right, if this is my instrument, how do I use it? And they were making the most of that sound. And simpler things like the Super Mario Brothers theme, which kind of, that's been translated into real musical instruments that many times and in that many different ways, and none of them sound as good as the original. And it's like we've just accepted this new sound. It's just essentially it sounds like a cheap keyboard, but deliberately and with a. I have this theory that the reason why we've latched onto that kind of music is that there's something about the fact that what you're listening to is the purest expression of a chord. You know what I mean? There's no... even though there's something prettier about a string orchestra playing a chord, when you've literally got the 3 to 5 notes of the chord, whatever it is, played just as a flatline beep, and you are hearing the chord.
Purest form, the pure tone.
Yeah, there's something about that just sits in your head and goes, here's a chord, and you go, oh, that's lovely. And you know what I mean? It's clean and it's
exactly what you mean. Because like on a piano or a violin, there's like harmonics that dynamic sounds that change and whatnot.
Yeah, and of course there are loads of musical instruments, not least among them the human voice, where we accept a wide range of fluctuation from the actual note itself, and and we are happy with that and we like it. But with an old-fashioned game chipset or whatever it is, you don't get that unless they work it in deliberately, program it in. And so you are hearing these pure sounds, and it's I think that's just something that wasn't around before. I mean, of course there were synthesizers, but even they emulate vibrato and things, and we didn't have that. So.
Now you've got me wanting. I'm going to search out a VST that is just pure tones. So I just get the pure tone this and the pure tone that. Excuse me. Oh crap! My infectious cough will not leave. Do you want to play Guess That Tune? This is from a Game Boy game by Capcom, which had some of the best graphics for a Game Boy. And I haven't played it in a long time, so I may be quite rusty. Stuffed up the ending, but yeah, that we've all played.
I don't know.
Capcom.
I don't know it either.
You really don't know? Gargoyle's Quest.
Oh yeah, wasn't that related to Ghosts and Goblins? Like a spin-off?
Correct. The character you played in Ghosts and Goblins was one of the end-level bosses from Ghosts and Goblins. The character you played in Gargoyle's Quest, the actual Gargoyle, was an end-level boss from Ghosts and Goblins.
I don't know why, but I really was much more satisfied with a small number of Game Boy games than my console. Something about the idea of like being home, and home is where this thing is, and this is the thing that I need. And the Game Boy was like kind of a substitute. It was kind of the methadone that could get me by, like when I'm away. But really, I want to just get back to the freaking TV. So, I had, honestly, Mario Land, Tetris, Kirby, the game Yoshi, and I think that might have been it. Maybe one other, but I did not have an extensive Game Boy collection, I must say.
Here's the thing: I did have an extensive Game Boy collection, but I played my Game Boy at home. I rarely took it with me on outings, unless it was to visit my cousin who also had a Game Boy.
Yeah, for me it was
Mario
I
Land
had.
2. Sorry. That was the one.
Oh yeah, Mario Land 2.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
Amazing.
Yeah, but the thing is, that was because it was closer to what a console game was, right? I mean, that was a few steps closer. For me, it was I had quite an extensive Game Boy collection, and the cartridges all rattled about in the bag that I carried the Game Boy in. But yeah, I mainly played it at home or in the car. But like, I used to play it. My mum was a teacher at the next school, so I had a car key, and I would sit in the car and wait for her after school, and I would just play on the Game Boy. And to me, the Game Boy, you know how in about 1998, 99, there was this thing where a whole new load of people were buying Game Boys, and to them it was Pokemon, and there was almost no other. The Game Boy and Pokemon were interchangeable. To me, the Game Boy was Link's Awakening. That was what it was, and everything else was just by the by. And that's because Link's Awakening was a game that had that same feeling of size and weight to it that a console game did, but it was on the Game Boy, so you could play it in bed. That was the main thing. I didn't have a TV in my room. I had to go down. I had to interrupt anything that was being watched on TV to play any games. But now I could play a proper game in bed, and that changed everything. That I loved that.
And
yeah,
Link's Awakening DX was one of the early Game Boy Color games.
Yeah.
The same game, but in full color.
Yeah.
Also, what do you guys think about, often when you see, which console do you press? Some idiot's going to jump in, PC Master Race. What those youngsters, I think, fail to realize is there was a point, and I think it's the reason why consoles are still so popular to this day, that consoles, once upon a time, were superior to the game graphics on a PC. It was, I think, around the Nintendo 64 era was the last era. Sort of PS2, GameCube is where it started to catch up, and then from that point onwards, PC were the better option in terms of graphical quality.
Oh yeah, I mean the thing about PC games being the same thing as console games but with better graphics is a recent one. It's a very recent one. You know, it's sort of last gen really. Although there was more of a kind of a divergence between the things. I mean, you could always, so for example, in the days of Mega Drive versus SNES, over here at least, there was also Amiga, which was genuinely a contender. Like nobody knew, but if you had one, then you were looking at graphics that were of a similar quality.
I had an Amiga.
Did you?
Yep. Sorry.
So you know what I mean. Oh, and you know then how good they were for music as well. That was another example of game music just being phenomenal.
I actually must confess, I had a multi-year phase between 64 and the Wii where I became that person. I became like, we got the 64 late. We got it in 2000, and I had until then borrowed my friend's 64s on occasion, but we got it in 2000, and then later that year we got our family PC, and I just found this demo of a game called Thief, and so looking over at the blockiness of Banjo-Kazooie and seeing this fluid game where sound surrounded me and it scared the crap out of me when I turned the lights off, there was no comparison, and I really just did not care about the GameCube at all, and not until the Wii was in its, like, gosh, I didn't get a Wii till 2010. So I had a whole decade where I was a PC gamer, but what I realized is that the problem with PC gaming is, and this is the obvious one, is that there's this sense of, I don't know, like trying to keep up with your technology for the technology required by the game to make it look as good as it can be. And that's sort of a never-ending, infinite curve up where you're never there's always something that, a way that you can make it a little bit smoother, get that frame rate worked out. Oh, the details on the leaves on that tree a mile away, and around 2003, I talked out. To be fair, it was not a great decade in which to decide PC was the best because we got a lot of crappy sequels to great games. For instance, Deus Ex 2, Invisible War, sucked. Thief 3 sucked. Half-Life 2 was okay. Some people say it's the perfect game. I didn't like it as much as everybody else. It was great, but like, I don't know. But like, and then Quake 4 was like just a dud. Doom 3 was great for 5 hours, and then it was awful for 20. It was not. It was enough to turn me back to the holding a thing in my hand. As much as I will miss the mouse keyboard thing with a shooter, it's taken me so long to get used to dual analog sticks because it's just so slow.
Yeah.
The idea of turning around at the speed of time when you're getting shot at, as opposed to whipping around your mouse and going, "Ha ha! I saw your shadow." Blam blam blam. It's more satisfying.
Yeah, it's quite a thing to get used to, isn't it? It's like it's glacial. You have to. Oh, I've got to shoot that guy. Even when he's like there on your screen, and you're like, okay, pow.
That's one of the things about the Wii U that I liked is that Zombie U, which I only got the demo for, but Zombie U includes a button that allows you to do a quick 180, like a very quick 180. And even though it's imprecise and sometimes you really want to do a quarter turn, it's still, if you hear somebody coming up behind you or see their shadow with the dynamic lighting or whatever, it is sort of a fix, but nothing like playing Medal of Honor in multiplayer at a LAN party and somebody being like, "I'm going to shoot you, I can see you," and you turning around and being like, "No, you won't." It's the most amazing feeling. And in Halo, you're just kind of, if they've got you in their sights and you haven't turned around yet, you're toast.
I've got a friend who has exactly the opinion you were just saying, which is that like even though if you go so let's say you've got a PC that can run all the games well right now, you're going to get 60 frames a second all the time. You're going to get the graphics going to be amazing, but to him the stress of the knowledge that if you just did something, you could improve it. Right. That to him is more stressful than knowing that the version you're playing is not as good on a console, because then at least it's not your fault.
There's rarely a feeling of adequacy with your machine when it comes to console games, unless you have the Wii U right now. But be that as it may,
that looks fine.
Say again.
The Wii U, it looks fine. I thought Mario Kart 8 looks fantastic, and I've just been playing Hyrule Warriors.
Absolutely, but they do some games where they're like, "Oh yeah, well the Wii U can't really handle the processing power for our games, and we don't really want to program for the pad, so sorry Wii U." Like that happens every day. I see video game news about like Sony changes their mind about the Wii U for a million games that are coming out, and you're like, "Oh yeah, this is becoming a trend." I totally agree that when things look good on the Wii U, they look amazing. But well,
that's because they're very good at making, or Nintendo are at least, for making games for that and going, right, this is, you know what I mean. They'll make a game that needs Wii U hardware and nothing more, and it looks perfect. It looks just as good as anything on the high-powered machine. I ought to say that I am a PC master racer in a sense. Not in terms of attitude, like I don't think that you should only play games on PC or whatever, but I do have a PC that I maintain so that it can usually play the games. And by the way, the secret to not feeling like your hardware is slowly trickling away from you is to and of course this is the answer, is to get a PC at a time when you randomly have enough money to get a stupidly good one. Yeah, like I think the way that most people build up a PC is to go, okay, well I've got 300 quid. What can I get for that that's the best? Whereas the way I went was, okay, the best graphics card is 200 quid. I will wait until I've got that. The best motherboard is this. I'll wait until I've got that. And then eventually you go, right, I can afford it today. And then it'll last you 4 years. And then you can upgrade again. And I've had to do that. I've had to upgrade once. But not everyone can do that. Like, I've got the excuse that I need mine for work. So that's the excuse. That's why
You know what I think it is, Dave? I think I just figured it out. I think the stress of owning a PC as a gamer is basically just a cruel fast forwarding of aging. It's just a fast forwarding of the things that we all deal with. Like the first time I just turned 30, and I remember being 27, and this is a little bit TMI, but getting my first cramp while in bed with a lady and going, oh no, this can't be happening now. I'm too young. I'm too young to get a leg cramp. This wasn't even that hard. We weren't even doing acrobatics. I was just doing the normal stuff, and I've got a cramp, and now, and I feel like with a PC, you're always racing against time, knowing that you're marching toward obsolescence with every day. But if you have a console, the games that were made for that console give you immortality, because as long as the console's in good working order, which is its own thing, as long as it's in good working order, it will play that game just as well as it's supposed to. And so in that way, it's almost like, do you want to be the fittest for right now, or do you want to have a thing that, as long as the console works, you're immortal?
Now, the problem with that, of course, is that there's a danger that consoles might start to go the PC way, based on the fact that they've just announced this new 3DS, which is more powerful than it's not 3DS 2. It's just a 3DS, but it's got a higher CPU or something than the normal one. And so Xenoblade is going to come out, and it's not going to run on the old 3DSs. Now, hopefully, that doesn't catch on as a thing, because, come on, we can't rebuy the same console every few years.
That is true, but what I thought you were going to say there is consoles would take the route of what the N64 took when you could upgrade the memory pack, and the consoles would become upgradable. So rather than buying a whole new console, you just get, okay, I want better graphics, get the new graphics thing for my console, get the new whatever thing. But the thing about that is...
PC is.
Well, true. Yeah. But the Banjo-Tooie, which did not require the memory, but Donkey Kong did. There were bits in Banjo-Tooie that looked better than Donkey Kong, and it didn't require the memory expansion pack. All right, now on to our last topic before we close, and that is, I know how Zach feels about this already, that is the advent of 3D. 3D gaming, which is very quickly becoming the advent of a wearable headset. So, Dave's busy. Brent, do you want to offer your thoughts?
I would love to. Okay, so the thing is that it's being dressed up as this new technology, but as a kid born in '84 and really hitting, puberty and learning about manhood in the '90s, one thing that was very prevalent was this sci-fi myth of virtual reality on the way, and then the Virtual Boy happened, and it flopped because the technology wasn't ready. But I feel like this is an idea that has been bubbling and just waiting, like Rip Van Winkle, just basically waiting in this time coma. Is there any other kind? But anyway, waiting just in the wings for the technology to catch up. And I have to say, while I think there will always be a place for games that have a fixed perspective, the idea of true immersive interaction, I think that it's really exciting, and I just hope that, well, you know what, I don't even have to hope. It reminds me of when console games made the 3D jump, and a lot of them had inelegant or clumsy first entries into 3D because it was new and not everybody knew how to do it well, and so I think we're going to see a little period where you have a lot of experimentation, probably some, really great franchises over the next 5 or 10 years will be virtual reality-ized, and some of them will be worse for it. And then, it's basically going to be like, once we get over the gimmick, there'll be some great games and new kinds of games we've never actually played because it hasn't been immersive, and hopefully some way to still play a game where you have a fixed perspective, and that's the point. Because a side-scroller, I don't think is ever going to be more fun just because you're walking in a straight line and jumping. I don't think that's going to improve aside in much the same way as um, watching an opera isn't any better from the wings or from the catwalk just because you're in a different space. You're supposed to look at it from this perspective in the audience. So, but I have to say, I'm a little scared of what could happen because if Facebook bought Oculus, so if you're suddenly going to integrate social media with true virtual reality in a broadband internet world, then dangerous, crazy things could happen. But also, like, imagine if we were having this hangout, and because we all have the helmets, we're all looking at avatars of each other that are scanning our face, and we appear to each other to be communicating in real time in a real space. Or if I wanted to have a Q&A panel like I do at a convention, but I invite everybody, my fan base that has the helmets, and they all have a front row seat, to seeing me, and they, this stuff I think is on the way. So it's not just gaming. I think that we're going to see a thing that was intended for gaming. We're going to see that become a social media, peripheral, but also a lot of things are going to open up. And I mean, so the whole spectrum. I think porn's going to change. Just saying. I mean, let's be honest. If people want it, it's going to happen. And so we could be seeing a lot of like things that were only really the realm of sci-fi stuff, like the holodeck on Star Trek, really coming into the fore. We're going to see probably all kinds of like new legal tweaks and new like ways of dealing with things, because now you can virtually be in a space, and can you do bad things in this virtual space where you really feel like somebody's there? Like, I'm fascinated by it and looking forward to it, but I am a little, I have to say, I think I won't be an early adopter. I think I'm going to hang back and see how everybody else makes a fool of themselves, and then kind of jump in and see what the ropes are once they've been sort of figured out by the emergence of the masses.
Right. Just getting back to that. Oh, go, Matty.
I was going to say, it brings up an interesting point that I was reading a article, and I can't remember what it's called now, but one of those virtual reality worlds, just escapes my mind, where it was no more than just Sims without a plot line. It was just turn up and do things in the virtual world.
Second Life?
Second Life, thank you. That's the one, Second Life. So I was reading about it as someone who revisited Second Life, 10 years, 9 years, whatever, after they'd first sort of popped in and had a look. They were a journalist. But it brings up this idea of, are we in fact creating a new country, a new nation state? Is the internet going to become a place where we're going to need not just necessarily new laws inside each territory, but are we going to actually have to see the creation of the entire system that a nation state needs to survive? Are we going to need to better regulate our currency, say Bitcoin? Are we going to need an internet constitution if we're all engaging on it on a much more fundamental level once virtual reality becomes a big part of it? We suddenly start to see things like Second Life being bigger, not just bigger as in bigger people, but I mean as in a bigger expanse of data flowing back and forward. When are we going to get to the point where we now say, well, you strap that headset on and you're actually now in a new country, you might even need a passport to go there and that kind of thing. But when are we going to separate it? Because there's small little micro things that I can do here that I can't do in the UK or the US, and when is it going to get to a point where we need another world? We need the internet to become its own country.
Right.
That is an interesting question. It makes you wonder what kinds of things in the transitional period could occur. Like right now, I have some videos that are legally okay for my American viewers to watch, but if somebody in Germany tries to access them, they can't. So is it like, we're all meeting in a virtual reality pub and drinking our actual beers at home, having a grand old time, but our friend from wherever suddenly is like, hey guys, the regulations of my country don't allow me to enter that pub, so could you guys come outside? Like this could be a very real thing very soon.
It really is, and I think it'll transcend games. That games will transcend, just the standard start and finish, and it'll go beyond the MMO stylings as well, where the internet will become a game. The internet will just be a giant game, basically. It'll have to have game mechanics. It'll have to have world.
I think some people already think it is.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
I said. Wait, hang on. Someone said something.
I think we all did.
And in getting to Maddie's thing, I mentioned in one of my YouTube videos that Oculus Rift, imagine Amazon, but you're actually walking around a virtual bookshop the same way you walk around an actual bookshop. You can actually virtually pick the books up and virtually flick through them.
Yeah, but the problem with that is that's I like that idea, but I don't think it'll ever happen because that's actually more convoluted than what Amazon is now, which is that you just go, I want the book, and the book's there. And this is one of the things that when people were imagining virtual reality in the 80s and 90s and things, and they were going way too convoluted. They were imagining computer interfaces that were like in no way helpful for getting the actual job done. And so one of those would be like, imagine if you wanted to find like, oh, I want to buy, what's a book? I want to buy A Tale of Two Cities. And now you can type A Tale of Two Cities and it'll appear. But if you had to enter a shop and wander around, I mean, honestly, that's one of the reasons we don't do that as much anymore, and the shops are dying, is because you have to be there for a much longer time than you need.
But imagine this, taking the idea of game mechanics into this virtual world, rather than, say, going to Amazon or a virtual store and browsing a virtual bookshelf. How about you kind of, like MMO style, get your, Viking late Victorian gear on, go down and sit in the pub and have a listen to a virtual Dickens read Tales of Two Cities to you and whoever else wants to join in. If you want to turn up to Metallica's 4036th concert in Antarctica, you go. It's not like watching YouTube video. You strap your headset on it and you stand in the crowd, and
I think we will see. I think we're going to see another .com boom, because I remember I wasn't that old. The .com boom really happened between the ages of 14 and 17 for me, but I still remember seeing billboards and ads for companies that seemed very impractical even at the time, like buying a coffin online. There was this thing called, like, I don't know, it was something like caskets.com or something really stupid, and I remember thinking at a fairly tender age, why the hell would you do that instead of just go to the place where they have the boxes and go, I want that box. Probably there will be people that go, wouldn't it be cool if they could come in and do all this stuff, and there will probably be a lot of investment, and then a lot of people will realize, oh, it was just easier to go and click on the thing. People were satisfied with that, so we don't, there'll probably be a lot of. I feel like we'll end up having it be more like going to listen to Charles Dickens read you a story, where it's not so much about pure consumerism, and it's not really going to aid in our consumer. Because what are the things we still need to do in person? Pretty much trying on clothes, driving, test driving a car, and a lot of these things you just can't simulate in a way that's cost effective. So I think a lot of it will stay the same, but what you'll see is maybe suddenly now there'll be a virtual Disneyland or a virtual Harry Potter land of Universal Studios, where you just pop on the thing and you pay an admission fee, and yes, it's not really, you can take a little roller coaster ride, and of course you're not really there, but and I mean, I don't know if you guys are familiar with I think it's called the Omni Walker. It's this thing that
yeah.
It's hard to describe without having the picture right in front of you, but it's a treadmill that goes in all directions.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The omnidirectional treadmill. I am familiar with it.
Yeah. Well, and what's exciting to me about that is that I always kind of wish that I could combine all the time I waste playing video games with some kind of exercise. Imagine the cardio you would get if you had to walk through Skyrim. That would be, even if you walked twice as fast in the game as you do in real life, you'd get a little bit of a cardio workout if you were doing like 5 hours on a Saturday or something.
Yep.
And that could be really good, especially if parents are saying, okay, Timmy, you can play this game, but you must use the Omniwalker, because otherwise you're gonna sit there and you're gonna not exercise. But if you use the Omniwalker, you can play this game for 4 hours today. Like, that's a pretty good deal, you know?
See, if that had happened in the '90s, Sonic would have never taken off.
No.
Well, actually, Sonic would probably, but all in the wrong way, because there would have been a headline that just says like massive breakout of children passing out from playing Sonic.
Juvenile cardiac arrest.
There would have been like 60 Minute Reports, CNN, like, all the news outlets basically interviewing these kids. Like, well, what happened? Well, I just had to run so fast.
I love the idea though that's because like the thing about Sonic is that he runs fast, but in this world it would be that the players just ran really fast, which they could have done in any game, but this one just gave them permission. You should run faster than usual to play this game. Okay.
And think how terrifying that would be with the treadmill.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, I just figured it out. Can you imagine? I just watched the pilot the other day on Amazon of the early 90s TV show of The Flash. Wouldn't it be cool if they made a game where when you walk as Flash and turn on like Flash mode, you're going 500 miles an hour, but even though you're walking fairly normally, but you have to still steer and not like fly off of the side of the road into a mountain because you're going so fast? That could be fun.
Yeah.
I have this theory that based on exactly that in the future, the gamers and nerds will be the fittest people in the world. If the world goes to shit and there's an apocalyptic whatever, you get the gamers to do the fitness-related stuff, climb that mountain, be the messenger, because it's the gamers who rose up against all odds. Yeah. Just getting back to what Brent was saying about these new things coming out, and when you don't really, the game companies don't know how to use the technology. Like when games went from 2D to 3D. I think Super Mario 64, while it wasn't the first 3D platformer game, it was the first one that did it right. So when every other company looked at that, they were like, oh, that's how it's done. And then all 3D games from that point on were basically Super Mario clones. Also getting to the point of the adult game that you mentioned, Japan already has an anime-style Oculus Rift adult game.
Yeah. Yeah.
And have any of you seen the 1990s? It's a Japanese dating game, so I'm sure you're familiar with that concept. Anyway, getting away from that, but still sticking with the virtual reality. Have any of you seen the movie Existence?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
In that movie, there's a game, and the winner is the person, like, you have to kill the other opponents or something, and the winner is the person who gets out. Anyway, whatever. The technology is so advanced that in the virtual world, you can go into another virtual world, and you can go deeper and deeper. And the movie gets to a point where they're getting lighter and lighter and lighter, to the point where we find out that the way what we think is the real world as an audience member at the beginning of the movie is actually, I think, 1 or 2 layers deeper than what it actually is, and the technology is much simpler. And the closing line of this movie, because the guy gets out and he kills someone, and the main character's like, "What are you doing?" And his final line was, "How do you know we're not still in the game?"
Whoa, dude! This reminds me of a movie. If anybody watching goes, okay, I've got to watch all these movies about what they thought virtual reality was going to be like, I'm not going to spoil the ending, but there's a movie that nobody remembers called Brain Scan, where basically this kid just, buys a game, and it says, like, warning may cause, like whatever, like, warning may be too much for you, kid. And so the kid's like, of course I want to play. But then, like, this, this kind of random, semi-horrific punk rocker guy, comes out of the TV, and what is real, what's not. But it's very similar, and it's almost like the fears of, or not fears, but like the sci-fi speculation about what this technology could do really preceded the technology. I mean, I guess that's how it always goes, but like now we're really seeing it happen.
There's actually
I'm still like, sorry, that go on.
There's actually back about 10 years ago, they were running the Outer Limits. Except it was like the newer like color version of it that they were like reproduced. Yeah, and they did one where a guy had a pod that he climbed into, and he had a virtual world. And the virtual world, he had a wife, and he basically had a mistress and all that. And then in the real world, he had a wife as well. And so basically, he lived these two different lives. And I think I didn't catch the meat of it, but what I was getting was that there was something going on, like a war was happening in reality, and that he kept going, and basically he was using the virtual reality as an escape, like to escape that, like, because his job was horrible, and everything was just absolute shit in real life, and so he kept using this virtual reality, but the virtual reality started catching on. And his virtual wife started to become aware of all these things, and so I remember the episode ends with him basically saying, he's trapped. He can't actually exit the pod. He's stuck in this. He's freaking out, and all of a sudden, his virtual wife comes up with a baby. And it's just like, look at our child, and like her family is there, and so basically, he's trapped in this virtual reality. And I just remember the last shot, and it pans out. And you see the pod, and then there's the nuclear wasteland around it.
Oh my God.
Because
awesome.
the guy was in the... Yeah, and so it was just like this, like that whole virtual reality, like, what's the point where we can't distinguish it, but at the same time, what's that point where it starts to define what we do? Like, we... Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Zach, go ahead. My bad.
No, go ahead. No.
I was... Oh, no. You go.
And just kind of like where we start to do things in virtual reality, that they start to have effects on what we do in reality. Of just like, you do something like where you have, like, I don't know, it's the idea of like, what if in the virtual world you're a detective solving crimes, but in this like reality you're a banker, and just, yeah, you're basically doing like normal, it's normal everyday life, but then where you start to, like, maybe you start to, it starts to interfere with your real life, where all of a sudden you start, like, seeing things and you start to blur the two different perspectives.
A simpler version of that, which presumably that episode of The Outer Limits went into, is if that guy has a wife in real life and a wife in the virtual world, is that cheating or not? If
Yes.
It's an indistinguishable from real life world, but it isn't real.
You know, I think you know how Isaac Asimov wrote the rules of what robots, like the the first rule of robots is robot cannot willingly harm or fail to protect a human. I feel like we're gonna soon need rules for virtual wives. Rule number 1: virtual wives cannot catch on. I think that's pretty important. Otherwise,
well, the question, and the wider question of that is, like, at what point will virtual people start to mind whether or not they're virtual people?
Oh God! It's the new civil rights.
And the other question is, which people are actually looking into now, is what if that's us? Because we're at that point. If it turned out we were the virtual people, we would mind right now, and so they're actually trying to sort of not find out, like, oh, we'll find out, but, you know, just investigate philosophically. What if we're the simulation? What if we're the video game gone beyond?
Well, I think that's like a pretty old philosophical thought experiment. It's just that now we have the technology. Like, there used, like, what was it, the brain in a vat, right? This is at least 100 years old, if not older.
Yeah.
But they didn't have the technology. It was like, I think it was like pre-Frankenstein. So they were just imagining what if we're somehow just a brain. But now that, I mean, like, you know, I listen to this very philosophical podcast that deals often with religion versus logic, and one of the things people sometimes say when they're trying to prove the existence of God is that, like, you know, stipulating or positing that we could just be a simulation, and that now the technology we're inventing is showing us how that could have been done. But I don't know. I feel like at some point, once virtual, you know, software consciousnesses become sentient, I feel like it'll be pretty much on the programmers to, like, some kind of fail switch, some kind of or fail safe rather, kill switch, something where you flip a switch and they go, "Oh, just kidding. I want to do whatever. Just turn me off if you want," or something. Because if you don't have that, I mean, it could get really hairy.
Yeah, because the last thing I want to
know
do
what
is go into this virtual
Yep.
virtual reality, just to like relax or something, and then basically turn around and like someone's standing in that reality, like basically an NPC, basically just goes, "Oh, it's you." Because the second I have an NPC in a virtual reality say that to me, that's the second where I'm ripping off the headgear, and basically there's going to be a for sale sign on that bastard in my front yard just saying, "For sale, cheap."
But
The moment when you become
here's the thing.
unwelcome in the virtual world.
But can you imagine that the technology that would be required to create that could also create a technology where you improvise a scene with a character who's smart enough to go almost anywhere you'll go. You know what I mean? To like not quite holodeck, but like you could even have. Oh my God! I'm sorry, my brain just exploding with things right now because you just flash to a scene where you're there and you know enough about your character to converse with this flashback character. And as long as you don't go way off the mark and say something like, baba booey, they'll talk to you and tell you what you need to know, but you can make it your own because they're smart enough. Oh my God, how cool would that be? We'll be 80 by the time they figure that out, but wow, that would be so neat.
It doesn't matter if we're 80 because we'll just clip on a headset and then we'll be 30 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because I know that actually that'd be great. Like some of the video game characters, like really developed video game characters that some of us really like to actually go into this reality and have a debate with. Because I know that my favorite video game, tying this back, is BioShock.
Yeah.
And to my dream.
By the way, Zach.
Technology.
I just want to say, Zach, that I've just 2 days ago finally started playing BioShock, so no spoilers.
I won't say anything. But one thing I would love to do is one of my favorite things to do for virtual reality would actually go into virtual reality, sit down at a desk, and have a formal debate on the City of Rapture with Andrew Ryan.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that'd be cool.
Especially just to get into the whole dynamic of it, and basically you could actually that could actually be a step. Is that could be an extra level of gaming? That could actually be an extra feature in games? Is you put on the headset, you play Zelda, and then here's a commentary with the creators where you actually go into a scene, and all of a sudden the scene freezes, and you see these two guys come out, and they're like, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm so-and-so. I'm the programmer, I'm the composer. Let us walk you through this scene as we built it."
Yeah, come over here and see what we hid around the back of this wall.
Or imagine just a detective game like L.A. Noire, except that if you turn it on hard mode, now you've got to ask the questions. They don't have them on a pad for you written out. You've got to figure out what to ask them, and they're smart enough to, they might have a fail-safe I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. But they might have a don't go there kind of thing to say. But how cool would that be if it knows what you're saying? Ugh.
But one thing that we have to be aware of is I think probably one of my favorite depictions of virtual reality gaming is Better Than Life in the Red Dwarf novels rather than in the TV series, because in the TV series they've got this concept where you put a thing on your head and now you're in a virtual reality game and it's just comedy. But in the books they actually went into how that would work in quite a science fiction minded way, and what they came up with is this. So there's this game called Better Than Life, and that's the premise. You will be happier there than you are in your real life. Everything will go perfectly for you. And they use that for comedy. They use that because Rimmer is actually quite self-destructive, so his world actually starts turning against him, and that's the joke. But what they come up with in the book is this idea that if you're in a city, you will see the druggies and the game heads just rotting in the corners because these people put these things on, the needles go into their cortex, and they're in Better Than Life, Why would you ever take that off? And so in real life, you're wasting away. You've got no nutrients. You're dying in real life. But in the game, everything's wonderful. And they come up with this extra thing, which is that the game is found to be addictive, so it's banned. But like, of course it would be. Like, there would be loads of gamers who would never stop.
I mean, gamers who don't stop now, like in South Korea, people have died from playing WoW because they weren't.
Yeah.
They just died. They didn't get the nutrients because they loved the game so much. Brent, you were going to say something.
Oh, just that, like, I think I'm on a real one-track mind here of like applications for the new technology that I keep thinking of. One of them being, I just finished the series, series 2 of Derek, which is a Ricky Gervais show about an autistic guy that works at a old folks home, senior citizens. What is it? There's many different words for it. You know what I'm saying? But like sometimes they bring in puppies and kittens from the local animal shelter to keep them company, and in Japan you've seen them use little robots to keep them company. They can interact with on a very basic level. But what happens when suddenly the virtual reality helmets are so cheap? You've got, like, in the mall, they've got a kiosk where they're selling, like, knockoffs, and you can afford to give a whole senior citizen center these helmets that let them feel like they're young again. How great would that be for them?
They already have that. It's Google Cardboard.
What?
Sorry? What?
Yeah, you need a phone that's compatible with it. There's Google Cardboard. You just fold the cardboard, you get the lenses, you put it on your head, and the lenses force the double image on your phone into 3D, and it's apparently very immersive, similar to the first Oculus Rift. And it's about $15 for the actual headset. Then of course you need a $500 phone. But, yeah.
Well, and then you need the virtual world. But what if you could have? What if you could select the year? What if you could go to a shop and be like, "Oh, I'll have 1975, please," and then you just go there, and it's like you go, right. You're going senile. You're old. You've not got long left. Let's just go to the past and let's just be there from now on and just.
Or even, could you imagine this? Imagine this, an educational application of this. You go into a history class in high school, and basically, okay, class, today we are talking about the Gettysburg Address. Everyone put on your helmets, and you basically you're there in the crowd, in the audience, and you see virtual Lincoln deliver the Gettysburg Address, or even something as or something even more like okay, today we're learning about the French Revolution. Do you have your permission slips?
But the thing is that there would be a certain amount of art to that. That would be like a directed scene. But what if, let's say we invented that now, and then we started to record 2014, so that in 3014 it's all there, and people can then plug into that year from the moment you recorded it, invented it.
Yes.
Every time in history from then on.
But if it were done educationally, I promise you, as a former teacher, you'd say, put on your helmets, and they would. And one kid, at least, if not half the class, would start like...
Yeah.
And you'd realize, oh, he's just using it to fall asleep, the little bastard. We invested $8 million into this one classroom, and you're falling asleep with the helmet on, you shit.
It's almost like the first step, in a way, the first steps towards time travel.
Yeah.
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 Especially.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing about.
Sorry.
Brent.
All the dangerous repercussions.
Okay. I'm reading this book. I'm reading this book called Dataclysm, and it's written by one of the founders of OkCupid, which is a dating site based on statistics created by mathematicians. And he made this book very recently using all of this data on Twitter and Google and all these things to show how we're finally just in the infancy of the internet being what it is, we have history now more accurately and in many ways less attractively than we ever had. Because you can look on Twitter and know exactly how people communicated, what they were saying, what kind of lingo they used, how they expressed themselves, who they talked to, and why. And so, as far as time travel, from here on out, from broadband, what do they call it, Web 2.0, which is the early 90s, on, you have all this data where if you want to return to that time, it's extremely easy to recreate because you have it. It's not the speculation and storytelling of history or this king won, so he made it sound like he had a much better time on the battlefield. It really is all there.
Mm-hmm.
So time travel, absolutely, from here on out, assuming we don't blow ourselves up and assuming that, solid state drives work for 100 or 200 years, we could absolutely have that because of all the freaking data we have all the time now about everything.
So perhaps one early method of time travel-esque stuff might be not actually sending ourselves back in time, but just creating a computer brain powerful enough to read the whole internet from that year and then just go, all right, it was probably like this, extrapolate all that and let you walk around in it. Looking at Google Map imagery of the actual places, looking at the way people were.
Now, step 2 to that is, how about when they've been getting this data long enough and compiling more and more of it from different sources, eventually you've got a computer that can go, okay, I see trends. Here's next year. And it's really accurate because we're really predictable apes.
Yep.
Yeah. And
So
that, of course, would be the best video game. Everyone will be able to fly spaceships around, whatever it is, in predicted future years, and with the feeling that it's actually what will happen rather than just some speculation.
But then it wouldn't, because we'd know. Okay, I'm going to stop because I keep on writing.
No, you're right. The computer tells us how to make that technology. It teaches us how to actually craft those spaceships. Suddenly we leap forward however many years in tech.
That computer's name is Deep Thought.
Deep thought.
Or if it goes absolutely tits up, Allied Master Computer.
Eventually, just HAL. I think HAL is actually.
Yes.
And you know why? Because of that really important line. Just a moment. Seriously, when HAL says "just a moment," you're like, "Oh shit, you're a real person in there." Because if he just said "wait," like processing, exactly. But instead, he's like, "Just a moment," and you're like, You're a little guy in there with your little, way too big bars that make up your brain because they didn't know how that would work. But
of course the military sister. Oh, it's you. How have you been?
All right, guys. I think that's Brent, you've come up with some fantastic ideas for how this technology could work in the future. But I think that's enough.
This entire conversation has been recorded by the NSA.
And
It's
tomorrow,
been red flagged all over the place.
Yep. One of my favorite potential Time magazine covers was "Time Travel Invented Next Year."
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, Brent. It
was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Would you be interested in coming back for the Christmas special at Christmas?
I often stay up late Christmas Eve, so, I'll say probably. That would be fun.
Okay. Right. Well, we'll hopefully see you then. And, all right. So thank you very much. Thank you, viewers, stopping broadcast.